Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I would like to welcome Elders Clarence and Barbara Nepinak, who are going to be telling us what it means to know winter. Barbara and Clarence are recipients of the Order of Manitoba. They are elders in our community and also elders in residence at the St. James-Assiniboia Museum. They've traveled worldwide delivering their teachings and cultural performances over many, many countries, and especially over the last 20 years here at the St. James-Assiniboia Museum, bringing their summer bear dance troupe to perform hoop dancing, drumming, and songs at our annual Heritage Day event. Without further ado, I would like to honor and welcome Elders Clarence Nepinak and our board member, as well as Barbara Nepinak, Elder and Cultural Facilitator. Thank you.
We're on Treaty 1 territory, the land of our ancestors, the land of the Métis and the Inuit and the settlers. It's always important that we acknowledge that. But today we're here to do storytelling. Primarily, Clarence will be doing the storytelling. In our culture, in our traditions, it was always the grandparents that would tell stories, that would teach us different things. And now is the time to be telling legends. Legends can only be told when there's snow is on the ground and the
ground is frozen.
And the ground is frozen. That's the only time you could tell legends. Any other time you could tell regular, ordinary stories, but these legends are the way we learned. We learned about respect, we learned about honesty, we learned, many good things. But we had to listen to the story. We had to interpret what they were telling us, and that's how we grew up. And so I really value those memories I have, my grandmother especially, that would always tell us these stories. And then from there, we were able to carry those oral teachings with us. So today we are grandparents, and we tell stories to our grandchildren. And it's really come full circle for us. We were at that age where we are considered as elders, as wisdom keepers, and been given that recognition. And we try and work with as many people as we can. When people reach out to us, we're there for them. So today, we're here to share the story about the spirit of winter. And it has many messages in there. Many stories can come out of that whole story part. So this is my husband Clarence, and he's going to talk about the spirit of winter.
Miigwech, Giatsu Kemena Ishkokaite, Mishani Shueni Nachugundu Sabadam Jue, did not Chigiani. We used to tell stories in the old days, and it was our elders that told us these stories, and we have come to that age now where we're telling the stories, and each time a story is told, it changes a little bit, even though the primary lesson in those stories are pretty well the same, but as you tell it, because it's not written and it's just done from memory, you tell your story just directly from what you remember, and I remember sometimes when we heard these stories, sort of thing, when I was a child, somebody else in the room who was listening would correct the person that was telling the story how it should have gone, sort of thing. So it was always different from person to person. So the person that that told these stories in historical times was a spirit, and we called him Nanabush. And Nanabush was the storyteller. And the person who was telling the stories on behalf of Nanabush was was one of the elders. So now it's our turn now to be Nanabushu, and so I try to tell it as accurately as possible. Now, the story I'm going to tell you is the spirit of winter. And in those times, Nanabush lived with the people. And and every now and again he'd go on his journeys, and he'd be gone for just a few days, or he'd be gone for a very long time. And in some cases, he would be gone for years at a time, but he would always come back. And sometimes when as in this story that I want to tell you, is the children don't even remember him. They just heard stories about him. So anyway, that was a time when it was winter for a very long time, and the people were suffering because it was cold and it was hard to get food, to take animals for food. So they were in the council lodge, and Nanabush was always in the council lodge when he was at home. And one day the elders asked him to move a lodge away from the community, a short distance away from the community, because he was, with his snoring, he was keeping the children awake, all night long. So they had approached his grandma Nokomis to prepare a lodge for him so that he could go set it up a ways from the community. And so when they asked him to do that, he approached his grandmother, and of course she already knew that what they were asking him to do. So she had already set up his lodge cover to set up, and everything that he needed in his camp. He went out with his grandma and selected a site a short distance away from the community. So he set up his lodge, and then one day he was at the council lodge meeting, and the people were complaining about the
cold.
Yeah, we're complaining about the cold, and so they were talking about this, how cold it was, and it's been cold for a long, long time. It just wasn't one winter; it was several years now that it was cold. So Nanabush says to the council, he says, "Well, has anybody ever thought of going to find out where this wind is coming from?" And they all looked at him as if to say, "What the hell is he talking about now?" So he says, "Well," he says, "I'll go and find out." He says, "I'll leave first thing in the morning." So they all agreed that he was going to be going. So then when the meeting was coming to an end, he said, to all the young warriors that were in there sort of thing in the meeting. He invited them to join him on this epic journey that he was going to go on to go find out how come it was so cold for so long, and find out who was doing that sort of thing. So he waited. The lodge was empty. He was there by himself, and he thought maybe, oh, okay, they'll, one or two of them will stay behind to offer to come with me, he thought. So then he got up and he went outside. There was nobody there. He was alone. So he walked back to his lodge, and he got into his lodge, and he started planning for his departure first thing in the morning at first light. So he put all his gear together, and he got it all prepared. But he got such a pile of it, Then he thought, well, I can't take all that. So he decided to start taking stuff away that he could have used, but he didn't need it. So he just took what he needed, and because he was half spirit and half human, one of the things he thought that he might need is bedding. So for sure he took his bedding with him, but so he got all his stuff there, packed it up, and he tried it on his back, and it was all okay, and so he put it down and went to sleep. And he woke up just before first light in the morning, and he was listening because it was winter time. He could have heard footsteps, so he was listening, didn't hear anything. So he went outside and thought maybe somebody would be waiting for him. Well, he went outside, nobody there. He was there by himself. So he got his pack, and he put it on his back and started walking. And the wind was always from the north, and it was just blowing steady all the time. And so as he was walking along, he thought, well, okay, if I walk straight into the wind, so that the wind blows into my face, I should be going in the right direction. So he started walking. And then he was thinking about midday. He was thinking, I wonder if I should stop and have something to eat. And because he was half spirit, he really didn't need to eat. So he kept on walking, and he walked and he walked. At the beginning, when he started walking like this, and then the first few days, his pack was on his back sort of thing, and he was, and the further north he went, the wind got stronger. And so when he walked for about 15-20 days, he was leaning a little bit into the wind like this kind of thing, and then he kept walking and walking and walking, and eventually, he was just hunched over, and he was walking and walking and never slept. He just kept walking, and then got to a point where it didn't even become daylight anymore. And he kept walking and walking, and the more he bent into the wind, the slower it would take. But he kept on walking, and he just didn't know how many days he'd walked, and because he lost count after a while, because it was dark. And so he kept walking and walking and walking, and then there was a point where he was just like this into the wind sort of thing. And then at one time, all of a sudden the wind stopped blowing. Boom. He fell flat on his face into the snow. And he lay there and he didn't hear anything. So he lifted his head a little bit like this. And each time he moved, the snow would make a noise, crinkle. And so he looked like this, and all he saw there was just the snow and the stars. So he thought he'd look the other way. So he looked the other way, and that's all he saw, was just the snow and the stars. So he decided, well, I guess I should get up. So he got up on his knees in the snow, and of course, every little move he made noise with the snow. And it's just like when you go outside to walk in the snow, you know, it's never quiet. So he got up on his knees and he looked this way, nothing. And then he looked that way, nothing. Just snow and ice and the stars. And he looked to the back, same thing. Snow and ice. And he looked on the other side, same thing. Just snow and ice. So he decided to get up. So he was standing now, and he looked this way, he looked that, just to make sure. And that's all he saw. That's all he saw was snow and ice. And the wind wasn't even blowing anymore. And so he looked around and couldn't figure out what happened to the wind. And then when he looked straight ahead, it seemed like there was somebody standing over there. So he decided to go. And when he had fallen, his pack had landed on his head, and it kept him down like that. So he undid his straps and took the pack off to one side. And then when he got up, he was standing. His pack was beside him there, and he looked. So he walked towards this someone he thought creature, and of course he was making noise the whole way through. And he got closer and closer, and then he got so close he was looking up at this creature. And all of a sudden, the creature spoke to him. "O Anishki, who are you?" He kind of looked around. Well, he's got to be talking to me, but he couldn't really quite see this creature's face. So then he says, "Nanabush Anishni." He said, "I'm Nanabush. And who are you?" So you could hear the snow crackling because he was just covered in ice and snow, this creature. And he looked down at Nanabush standing in front of him like that. And he says, "What do you want? What are you doing here?" Nanabush, he's looking around, and he looks up at this thing, and you can just see this. The hair is just ice and snow. So he says, I come to find out why the wind's been blowing so long and so hard and so cold. And the creature says, well, who are you? He says, well, I'm Nanabush. And who are you? Kiwetin. Kiwetin. He says, yeah, I'm the west wind. North wind, pardon me. I'm the north wind, he said. And why do you want to know these things? Well, he says, my people are suffering because of the cold. And I came to find out why it's been blowing like that for so long. Well, Kiwetin says, well, I was the one who was doing all that blowing. And then I saw you approaching, and I quit blowing. I was wondering who you were and what you wanted. Oh. Well, I wanted to, you've told me that you were the one who was blowing all this time. He said, yes. So now what? Well, he says, I guess now I can go back home. And tell the people. So Kiwetin says, okay, he said, I won't blow as much anymore. Okay, Nanabush says. So Nanabush turns and starts to walk.
He said, Rosa.
Oh, see, already I was missing something and Barb just reminded me what it was. And then Kiwetin says to Nanabush, because Nanabush had left his pack back there where he fell, and he had picked up his pack and put it back on again. And then Kiwetin's looking at him, and he says, is that your back? No, he says, that's not my back. He says, that's my pack. This things I need when I go on a journey, when I travel. Oh, he said, what's in it? He says, well, everything I need. He says, I got my food in there and other things that I need, an extra pair of moccasins. And Kiwetin says, food? And the bush says, yes, food. I gotta eat every now and again. Oh. Well, could you share your food with me? I guess I could, he says. Well, let me see it. Okay, so then he opens up his pack and he starts taking stuff out. And he's got these rocks there, and he takes them all out, puts them all out in front of himself there, and he's got his food there. And everything that he brought along in terms of food is all dried. Everything that he has with him in the way of food is dried. So Kiwetin says, could I taste it? Yes, I says, but I have to cook it first. Oh, okay. So cook. So Nanabush had brought up a stone, a flat stone, because he knew that it was, it was at home there, that's all they cooked on was on a flat stone. So he put it down there, and then he got his wood and started the fire, and he cooked the food. And of course, it started smelling. And then Kiwetin says, what's that smell? Oh, he says, that's the food cooking.
Dried berries and
Yeah. And he says, oh, he says, well, what is it? He says, well, he says, it's all the things I need to eat. He says, it's dried berries, pemmican. He says, well, what's pemmican? He says, oh, he says, it's dried meat. And then we prepare it in a way that we dry the meat, and when it's dried, we crush it and pound it down to a powder, and then take the berries and we mix it all up. One part berries, equal part of meat, and equal part of tallow, the fat. Oh, and we mix that all up, and we make it into these pans. Oh, okay. So now he's smelling this food. He says, well, when are you going to share your food with me? Oh, and Nepinak says, I'll share my food with you. So he's there and he's taking his time, you know, and finally, you know, Nepinak starts eating. Keewatin says, I thought you said you were going to share your food with me. Oh, yeah, just hold on. He says. So he hands him a taste of the food. And, that's good, he says. Nepinak says, yes, he says, it's good food. He says, it tastes really good. So he says, well, he says, are you going to give me more? He says, well, you know, he's huge. So Nepinak takes just a little bit, and he hands the rest of it to Keewatin. Keewatin reaches down and takes the pot and starts eating. Nepinak is eating, and he's watching. And after a little while, Keewatin is he's starting to change, you know, and Nepinak is watching. So, and after a while, all that's left of Keewatin is a puddle of water, because he was ice and snow, and now he's melted from eating that hot food. And so Nepinak says, oh, well, that's it. So he gathers his stuff together again and packs it up, puts it on his back, and walks home. When he starts walking, he heads straight south, you know, and he goes across when he was walking, it was still frozen a little bit, and he had to cross on the ice, the one river, the first river he crossed. And then he kept walking again for days, and then he comes out to the lake. So he's looking out over the lake like this, and there's no more ice and snow. It's all melted now. So he's thinking, I remember coming across here, but it was frozen. Now it's all melted. So he says, oh, well, that's nothing, he said. So he starts walking into the water, and he keeps walking and walking, and then he keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper, you know. He's up there like that, and then he just keeps walking. He doesn't know how deep he is, but he knows it's a long way. It's deeper. And at one point while he was walking at the bottom of the lake, Name comes swimming by. Name is the sturgeon. He's a big fish. And Nanabush says, "Hello, Name." Name looks, "Nanabush." He says, "What are you doing here?" "Well," he says, "I came to check to see about why it was so cold for so long." Name says, "Yes," he says, "the ice melted, the snow melted." He says, and the water is warmed up a bit. He said, "It's not freezing anymore." "No," he says. "Well," he says, I went to see Kiwedin, and Kiwedin isn't blowing as much anymore. So it's easier to travel." "Oh, well," Nanabush says, "well," he says, "I gotta go." He says, "I got a long way to go, you know." And he crosses the rest of the lake, you know. And he looks back and says, "That's a big lake." So because when he went across it in the wintertime, it was frozen solid. He's approaching the mountain, and he looks up, and that's a long ways up, you know. So anyway, he starts climbing, and he's climbing and climbing, and then he gets to the top of the mountain, and he looks down on the other side of the mountain. There's a river there, and then another mountain. So he climbs down and gets to the river, and it's a big river. You know. Didn't look that big from up there, but it's a big river. So he says, "Oh, well, that's easy." So he gets into the river, and then again, you know, it's so deep that he has to walk underwater, you know, and he comes up finally at the other side, and he starts up the other mountain. So he gets up there, you know, and he's looking down. Geez, he's thinking, this place is starting to look familiar. So he keeps walking, and as he's walking, he notices, "Oh, this is where I live." So he looks around and looks down the side of the mountain, and he sees children playing on the side of the mountain, at the bottom of the mountain, in a field. And he says, well, he's thinking to himself, well, I guess I'm home. So he goes down, and the children are playing there, and one of the bigger boys, you know, he falls down, and then he looks up like this, and he sees something moving on the side of the mountain. So he's thinking, he looks, that's Nanabush. He's come back. So, and he wasn't even born yet when Nanabush left. So he says to the kids, he says, see, he says, there's Nanabush. Well, gee whiz, you know, all the horrible stories they heard about him and all the crazy things he did, you know, they're all afraid of him now. So they go running off back to the lodges, their lodges, and Nanabush almost went the same direction as they did, but he had to go back to camp first. You could see his camp up there. So he walks to his camp, you know. He gets inside his camp, you know, and he started to unpack, and then he hears the knock. Somebody's knocking at his door lodge, at his door pole, and Nanabush says, yes. He says, who's there? So this young fella says, Nanabush. He says, the elders want to see you. He says, okay. He says, I'll be right there. So he just leaves his stuff as it is, and then he walks out, and the young man is running back into the camp. So Nanabush thought that he was going to wait for him. And, but they said, oh well, he says, so he goes walking towards the camp. And once he gets into the camp, not even the dogs are out. And there's no kids around. Nobody's outside. So he walks to the lodge and he goes inside, and they're all sitting there, and he's got his own chair, his own seat, and he goes, and then when he walks into the lodge, he gets greeted. Welcome back, Nanabush. You know, and they're all happy to see him again. The elders are, that is. So he goes and he sits back in his special spot there. And then, well, the elders say, are you going to tell us your story about your journey? He says, yes. He says, I will. So he starts telling them. Well, he'd been gone for such a long time. It took more than one day. It took several days for him to tell his story about his travels. And then from that time on, the ice would come once a year. And it would be springtime, and then summer, and then fall, and then winter again. And this would go on like this. So this is how Nanabush was able to change the seasons to spring, summer, fall, and winter.
That's the end of the story.
The end of the story. For this one, you know, there's a, when the stories were told, there were side stories too, through the whole thing. And when the elders would tell the story, you know, they would take a side step, a side story, and tell that story. And then they'd end up back with the main story, you know, so it was always these side stories. So it would take a year to tell the whole story, you know, so.
And it was believed this was about the time of the Ice Age.
Yep, the time of the Ice Age, and that's what, and Nanabush being a spirit, he was able to change these things. So